Hola clase, ¿cómo estás hoy? Muy bien. Alright, so today the learning target is to understand and use the properties of equality. So we've already talked about some properties of algebra, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those today, but we're specifically going to talk about properties of equality. What you can do to equations that make them stay equal. Alright, so a quick review on the properties that we've already talked about. So first, the commutative property. Remember, there were two of those, the one of addition and one of multiplication. So the addition one says A plus B equals B plus A. Order doesn't matter. And the multiplication one says pretty much the same thing. A times B is equal to B times A. The associative property, that was dealing with parentheses and saying where you put the parentheses, if it's just addition or just multiplication, doesn't matter. So if we have A plus B plus C, that is the same thing as saying A plus B plus C. And same thing goes with multiplication. A times B times C is equal to A times B times C. The inverse properties had to do with opposites. So in addition, if you had a number A, the opposite of that would be negative A. And so if you added those two opposites together, you would get 0. If you're talking about multiplication, and you had a number A, the opposite of that is 1 over A. So if you multiplied those two together, you would get 1. The identity properties were what could you do to a number to get itself. So if you have a number A and then add 0, you would get the number back, A. In multiplication, if you have a number A and you multiplied it by 1, you would get the number back. The distributive property said if you had some number A and it was multiplying in parentheses some B plus C, then that's the same thing as saying A times B plus A times C. So you're distributing the A to both B and C. And finally, the multiplication property of 0 just said any number A times 0 equals 0. Alright, so those are the properties that we already know. Now we're going to talk about some other properties, specifically known as properties of equality. Alright, we're going to start with the reflexive property of equality. Probably the most simplest one. If you have a number A, then it is always equal to itself. So it's just saying any number is always equal to itself. So A equals A, 5 equals 5, negative 7 equals negative 7, so on. The symmetric property of equality says if A and B are equal, if A equals B, then B equals A. So it doesn't matter if the A comes first or the B comes first. If they're equal, they're equal. The transitive property of equality says if A equals B, if A and B are equal, and B and C are equal, then A and C are equal. The next property is the substitution property of equality. That says if A and B are equal, then B can replace A in any expression. So just a quick example of this. If you have, say, x equals 3, so you know x equals 3, and we have an expression x plus 5. Well, we know that x is 3, so we can replace x plus 5 with 3 plus 5, which will give us 8. So all we did was just replace x with 3 and then evaluated the expression. Alright, 4 more properties left, and these are all going to be very similar to each other. So the addition property of equality says if A equals B, then A plus C is equal to B plus C. So that means if those two things are equal, if you add the same number on both sides of the equal sign, then those two things are still equal. The subtraction property of equality says if A equals B, then A minus C is equal to B minus C. So again, if A and B are equal, then subtracting the same number will still keep them equal. The multiplication property of equality says if A equals B, then A times C is equal to B times C. So again, if we have two numbers A and B that are equal, if we multiply the same number on both sides of the equal sign, so multiply each of those numbers by the same number, they will still be equal. And now for the final one, division property of equality. This one is only a slightly bit different. So this one says, if A equals B and C does not equal 0, so C can be any number, but it can't be 0, then A divided by C is equal to B divided by C. So again, if we have two numbers, A and B, and we divide them both by the same number, they will still be equal. Except if C is 0, because you just can't divide by 0. Alright, and that's it for the lesson today. Please remember to take notes on the entire lesson, and I will see you next class. Have a good night.